It was Wednesday, May 10, 2023. While Gus was at school, Toby Winters had been diligently reading and working with Bloodshot in an attempt to kill Mr. Dominus and destroy the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Although Toby couldn't talk to Bloodshot, Toby had found him near his apartment. Frequently, Toby Winters sat on a park bench near the intersection of Dixon Street and Newman Avenue. Toby Winters had enjoyed sitting near the intersection for lunch because very few cars passed through the roads. Toby even occasionally played a game where he would count how many cars would pass this intersection. Toby saw a familiar figure standing at the opposite corner of the intersection. The figure jaywalked through the intersection towards Toby. Toby scooted over. The man sat down with Toby Winters. This figure was Bloodshot. Bloodshot pulled out his earbuds and began to speak with Toby. "Hey Toby, I think there is a potential way we could kill Mr. Dominus. I have seen him in the town of Fero. I have reason to believe that he owns an old warehouse there. Maybe that is the base of operations for them. You could use the element in large quantities to obliterate the facility. Now we would have to lead him, of course," said Bloodshot. "That sounds good. But are there any problems with this plan?" asked Toby. "The problem is that the last time I checked, there were some 300 guards watching over the facility at all times. And they spotted me scouting the facility. I will admit that these guards are probably the best of the best. I was very close to getting a .50 caliber bullet in my brain. I'm pretty sure you would end up riddled with lead if you tried getting the element in there. Just like Thomas Clark," replied Toby. "I believe that if we want to defeat the NOS, we need some backup." "What kind of backup exactly?" asked Bloodshot. "Backup from the government. I can talk with George Barrington tonight. I could try to get him to believe this story. The Novus Ordo Seclorum may be inexorable, but there is one power that could defeat them with ease," said Toby. "The power of the United States Armed Forces," replied Bloodshot. "What are we waiting for? Let's get the cavalry." Bloodshot then stood up. Toby then began talking. "Not so fast," said Toby. "We still need to provide enough evidence and information to convince Mayor Barrington. Then, he might be able to create a small force to combat them. Which means, I am going to need your help. I want you to come meet Barrington with me." Bloodshot sat back down on the bench. "Why should I meet with that nutjob of a mayor? I don't exactly like being out in the open, let alone with a very public figure," said Bloodshot. "You have been a pawn in this game. I know that it is a bit of a gamble, but I'm going to need you to be wearing something nice. We both want the NOS taken down," replied Toby. "But you know more about them than I do. I just don't see the purpose of me being there," responded Bloodshot. "I will need some support from somebody who also knows about the Novus Ordo Seclorum." Bloodshot. "And Barrington doesn't like talking to people with fake identities like Bloodshot. Which means I will need your name. I was told by one of the members that your real name is Nicholas." "How on earth did you know that?" replied a shocked Bloodshot. "Like I said, one of the NOS members. I'm going to call Barrington to meet about all of this. I am going to say your first name now, before I call him. Are you ready?" asked Toby. "All right. I guess I'll help convince Mayor Barrington. And if he is convinced enough, we could destroy the Novus Ordo Seclorum before they get too strong," said Bloodshot. Toby then pulled out an iPhone 8. He went to the contacts list and called George Barrington. Hello? Asked Barrington on the phone. Hey Mayor, it's Toby. I want to talk to you about something. I am also going to be bringing a friend along. I'm a little bit busy right now. As a matter of fact, I am in a meeting with some representatives. I think we could talk later today at 6 p.m. However, I promised that I would be home by then, so it will not be at City Hall. I don't think you know where my house is, so here is the address. I would suggest writing this down. My address is 1207 Albert Street. It's actually only a couple blocks away from Freedom Miller High School, replied George Barrington, hanging up. All right, Bloodshot. I want you to be at 1207 Albert Street at 6 p.m. And I would strongly suggest wearing something at least partially nice. George Barrington is a pretty busy man, and if we want this plan to come into fruition, he must respect you, Nicholas. He respects me because of my intellect, said Toby. Standing up, Toby and Nicholas began walking away from the bench. After everything that the Novus Ordo Seclorum had done to Toby, he had finally been able to create a plan. Hopefully for Toby, this life with the Novus Ordo Seclorum would end. Back at the apartment, Toby Winters had read the vast majority of Thomas Clark's diary. To ensure that the evidence wouldn't be destroyed, Toby created a flash drive with all of the pages. Toby had also created a paper copy of the diary with the intent of giving it to Barrington. After all of this was said and done, Toby turned on the news. There was a story about the stock prices of many corporations. Although the vast majority of them plummeted after the deaths of many of the most prominent CEOs, there were some exceptions. One of the exceptions was VD3 Media, a company that Toby knew was owned by Harry Roots. Toby guessed that the companies that rebounded were all owned by Harry. During the news report, there was an interview with two of the survivors of the now infamous CEO massacre. The two survivors were none other than Pierre Dupont and Harry Roots. As soon as Toby saw those men on the TV, his blood started boiling. Although Toby had usually been good at controlling his emotions, he had been more aggressive. Toby had tried to control his anger, but sadly it got the best of him. Toby threw the remote in his hand directly at the television with all of his strength. The remote control hit and shattered as soon as it hit the TV. The TV cracked. Toby could no longer see Harry Roots on the now distorted screen. Toby sat off the couch and unplugged the TV. Toby then moved the broken television and picked up the parts of the remote controller. He looked at his watch. It was 5:06 p.m. Toby would have to go pretty soon. He quickly put on a collared shirt and walked out of the door. After Toby had lost two of his cars in the past, Toby was sick of driving, so he instead opted to use the train to get to the City Hall. Sadly, the nearest train stop was even farther away from Barrington's house than Toby was. Toby thought that he would be forced to walk over 2 miles to George Barrington's house. Toby walked to the bus stop to check the map of the bus line. He saw that there was a bus stop near the house of George Barrington. Although Toby missed the last bus, there was another bus stopping at 5:10 p.m. The time was 5:09 p.m. Suddenly, a bus stopped around the corner. It was right on time. The bus was surprisingly empty despite it being rush hour. Toby hoped that Bloodshot had listened to his advice. It was true that Mayor George Barrington was a very busy man. Toby thought about what he would do after he escaped the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Toby didn't know exactly what he really wanted in his life. He felt bad about aggravating Gus the other day. After a 15-minute bus ride, the bus stopped near Mayor Barrington's house. Toby got off the bus and began walking to the house. The house of George Barrington was large and modern. Toby saw Bloodshot wearing a tuxedo. Toby knocked on the door. It took a couple of seconds for Barrington to respond. George did finally open the door. "Hey, come inside. I still don't know the name of the friend you brought along," said Barrington. "My name is Nicholas," said Nicholas, putting his arm out. "Well, it is nice to meet you, Nicholas. Come inside," replied George Barrington, shaking his hand. "Come into my office. Toby here said he wanted to talk." "That is correct," replied Toby. "What exactly do you two want to talk about?" asked Barrington. "We'll talk about it when we get in your office," said Toby. As Toby and Nicholas followed George into the office, Toby noticed a kid around the age of Gus Blue. "You have a kid?" asked Toby. "Yeah, that is Tony Barrington. Quite similar to your name. He actually goes to Freedom Miller High School," replied George. "I have heard about you from my father," said Tony Barrington. "Anyways, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Winters. I have to go do some homework." Toby and Nicholas continued to walk through the modern house until they reached the cluttered office of George Barrington. Barrington closed and locked the door. "Okay, so while I was experimenting with the element and how it is highly explosive, so with the help of Nicholas, we shot some of the element and the lab was kind of destroyed," said Toby, showing the wound from the explosion. "So you two destroyed the lab. I'll try to get it fixed up. In the meantime, you are going to have to use what is left of the lab, Toby." "Is that it?" asked Barrington. "No. Because after the rubble cleared, we discovered a secret room containing a diary from Mayor Thomas Clark," said Nicholas. Toby then took out a flash drive. "This flash drive right here contains a file of his diary," said Toby. George Barrington then plugged the flash drive into his computer. He began skimming through the diary. "Also, I would suggest scrolling down to the last page," said Toby. George Barrington complied and read what Thomas Clark had to say. George didn't say a word. He just stood there. "Are you okay, George? You look like you saw a ghost or something," said Nicholas. "I didn't know that Thomas Clark knew he was going to die," said Barrington. "He should have told me." "Also in the room were pictures of people that might be connected to his death," said Toby. "Do you have any pictures of it?" asked George. "I forgot to," said Toby, "but one of the most promising things on that wall was writing on one of the pictures with the letters numbers. Do you have any idea what that means?" asked Barrington. "The Novus Ordo Seclorum, which I believe is actually Latin. Now, I have had some experience with these guys." "Both of us have," said Toby. "Why on earth didn't you tell me earlier?" asked George Barrington. "Because I saw the autopsy report on Thomas Clark. There were 27 bullets in his head. I don't want that to happen to you. I didn't have enough evidence about the NOS back then, but now I have enough to at least try to convince you that they are behind everything," said Toby. "Including the April 4th terrorist attacks?" asked Barrington. "Yes," said both Toby and Nicholas. "Well, I don't know if what you guys are saying is true. Come back with more evidence and I might start an investigation on them. We have been investigating the attacks on April 4th. And we have a pretty good lead on these communists who follow this guy named VB. The problem is that we don't know who VB is or if they are involved with the attack, said Barrington. VB is actually part of the NOS. If I were you, I would investigate more into VB, said Toby. Do you have any other prominent names that I should look into? Asked Barrington. Yes, I do, as a matter of fact, have a couple of names. There is Harry Roots, Otto Walter, Alia Marie Dupont, and the leader is this guy named Mr. Dominus, replied Toby. I'll look into that. I will admit that you two are pretty convincing, but before I can make any actions to try to stop these people, I'm going to be needing significantly more evidence before I will allow any investigations of this, said Barrington. For the past hour, VB's assistant, Sylvester, had been tracking Toby Winters. He discovered that Toby had been going to George Barrington's house with a vigilante that had worked with the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Sylvester had ordered 2 of the new soldiers for the Novus Ordo Seclorum to assassinate George Barrington. Sylvester was concerned about the mayor learning about the Novus Ordo Seclorum. In order to cover up his tracks, Sylvester had decided to attempt to destroy any evidence against the Novus Ordo Seclorum. He had found out about the diary from some of the communists wandering around the streets of Bencow Falls. Sylvester had also ordered another guy to break into Toby's home and steal the diary. Despite not knowing about the secret bunker, Sylvester had wanted every last member of the communist group to search any likely spot for evidence. Sylvester was in his beaten up 1955 Chrysler 300 with the 2 assassins. He thought that it was a good idea to strike sooner rather than later. Sylvester picked up his old flip phone and called a member. We begin in the next 30 minutes, said Sylvester. The man on the other side responded. Very well, said Sylvester. I might not be back at work for a few days. Please take care of duties in my absence. The man on the other side said. I will, responded Sylvester. The man that Sylvester was talking to hung up. Sylvester told the assassins to kill Barrington quickly. He needed George Barrington dead, or else the Novus Ordo Seclorum would be in a bad situation with the government. The assassins climbed up a tall tree. They saw George Barrington looking at his computer. The 2 men took out 2 gun cases containing M82 Barretts. They constructed and loaded the weapons. Also George, I wanted to discuss the element, said Toby. Okay, you guys have been studying it, correct? Asked Barrington. Yes, we used an ounce of this element to test its destructive capabilities. As it turns out, even a small amount of this stuff has the potential to shatter elements like iron, said Toby. Well, I am glad that Tobonium could have a place in the military, replied Barrington. Toby chuckled. One more thing. The name, Tobonium, is a bit ridiculous for an element. So I came up with a new name. Because it has a grey-like wintry color. I was thinking of naming it after my last name. Winternium. You know what, Mr. Winters? I kind of like that name, responded George Barrington. Also, your friend Nicholas hasn't spoken in a while. Is he okay? Nicholas was looking at a tall oak tree. Earlier in the meeting, he saw the leaves rustling, which was odd on a day with no wind. A couple of seconds later, Nicholas saw what looked like 2 green sniper rifles in the tree. He suddenly saw a hand cocking back one of the rifles. Nicholas didn't know who these snipers were going to kill, but one of them was pointed directly at George Barrington. Nicholas had to decide quickly. Even 1 second of thought could be the difference between life or death. He jumped out of his seat and sprinted towards Barrington. "Sniper!" yelled Nicholas, shoving George Barrington out of his seat. At that moment, one of the snipers fired. The bullet grazed the head of Nicholas and instead destroyed George Barrington's computer. The flash drive was still intact. Toby and Barrington crouched under the table. "George, I would strongly advise you to go into a room without any windows," said Nicholas, "and call 911. "And what are you going to do?" asked Toby. "I'm going to take care of the snipers. Maybe if I'm lucky, I could try to capture one of them," said Nicholas, putting on his earbuds. Toby took the flash drive out of the destroyed computer and made a run to the basement with George Barrington. Barrington got his phone out and dialed 911. "Hello?" asked the cop on the phone. "It's Mayor Barrington. Look, I need some help out here. I almost got killed by some snipers. My address is 1207 Albert Street," said George Barrington. "Roger that. 2 police cars are en route to you at this moment," the officer said, hanging up the phone. Toby Winters and George Barrington sat in the bunker quietly, waiting for the cops to arrive. In the meantime, Nicholas ran out of the door. He booted up the song Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. Nicholas was finally outside of Barrington's home. The snipers saw him with ease. Nicholas quickly pulled out a deagle and shot one of the snipers in the head. Direct hit. The body and the M82 Barrett both fell out of the tree and onto the grass. The other sniper began shooting at Nicholas. The sniper was able to shoot his right ear. But Nicholas moved just in time to ensure that he didn't get a bullet in the head. He shot the other sniper in the leg to ensure that at least one of the 2 snipers would come out alive. The sniper dropped his gun and let it fall out of the tree. Nicholas's ear was bleeding. Pretty soon, part of the right side of his face was covered in his own blood. Nicholas was used to having blood all over him, but never his own. No matter how bad it was, he still had a job to do. The sniper pulled out a Glock. Nicholas was climbing the tree as quickly as possible to prevent this assassin from killing himself. The sniper knew very well that getting captured was unacceptable. The assassin turned off the safety and almost shot himself. Luckily, Nicholas pulled the gun away from his face and held onto the sniper. 30 seconds later, a police car arrived at the scene. They noticed the dead body. "The other guy is up here with me," said Nicholas. "And am I a crook?" One of the police officers walked up to the tree. Nicholas gave the sniper to the cop. "If you were the one that killed the other sniper, then no. If what you guys said is true, then you killed that man in an act of self-defense," said the cop, handcuffing the assassin. "Louis, go inside and get George Barrington." "One more thing," said the cop, handcuffing Nicholas. "What is your name?" "I don't really want to say my name, but you can call me Bloodshot," said Nicholas. One of the other cops went inside. Tony saw the police officer. "Hey kid, are you okay?" asked the cop. "Yeah, I'm fine. If you are looking for the mayor, then he is in the basement downstairs. Go down the hall and turn left. You should see the stairs," said Tony. "Thank you for helping me out. I need to ask him a couple questions," replied the police officer. Toby and George Barrington were hiding downstairs for the past 5 minutes. That 5 minutes had seemed like 20 to Toby Winters. After these agonizing minutes, a police officer came walking down the stairs. He had a notepad in his left hand and a number 2 pencil in his right hand. The cop started speaking. "Okay, so Mr. Barrington, there was a man out there that I have reason to believe killed one of these assassins and wounded the other. Do you know who he is?" asked the police officer. "I am pretty sure his name is Nicholas. And this man just saved my life," replied Barrington. "Well, according to him, he should be called Bloodshot," said the cop. George Barrington stood still for a couple of seconds. Then Toby spoke. "Bloodshot is a vigilante, and Nicholas is his real name. And I will pardon this man of any crimes he committed," said George Barrington. "I understand, Mayor Barrington," said the cop. The police officer walked back outside and talked to the cop in the tree with Nicholas. "Hey Louis, anything from Barrington?" asked the cop in the tree. "Yeah, he is pardoning the Bloodshot guy." "Where is the sniper?" asked Officer Louis. "I put the sniper in the car while you were gone. He really is quite a fighter, but we are going to need him," said the cop in the tree, unlocking the handcuffs on Nicholas. Toby Winters stood up ready to go back home. "Wait, Toby, there could be more assassins out there trying to kill me," said Barrington. "We got Nicholas and some cops. They will ensure that you won't go down without a fight," responded Toby, grabbing onto George Barrington. Toby Winters and Mayor Barrington slowly walked out of the house in fear. It took 3 minutes for them to get outside. Both Toby and Barrington were relieved to see police officers at the scene. "Mayor, we have some good news. Your Bloodshot guy was able to keep one of the snipers alive. We'll keep him at the station. For now, he has a charge for attempted murder. If you want, we could do some good old interrogation," said one of the cops. Toby looked at George Barrington and asked, "Should I give the flash drive to the cops?" Barrington quickly nodded. Toby Winters gave the flash drive to one of the police officers containing the diary of Mayor Thomas Clark. George Barrington replied, "Listen up, officers, this flash drive contains evidence. I want the police to investigate all of this. Toby Winters here told me about an organization called the Novus Ordo Seclorum. I trust Toby. And if what he says is true, then the power of the United States government is at risk.